Would you work as a teacher or a police officer perhaps in the regions if that saw your student debt wiped or more probably cut down? The Labor Party is considering a policy which would see student debts reduced in exchange for people taking so-called public service jobs in the region. At least that's what they're discussing. Labor leader Andrew Little told me the idea follows the party's multi-billion-dollar policy of 3 years free tertiary education announced earlier this year.
As I get around and talk to people about that, particularly young people and their parents, what I often get is, well, what about those with loans now? What about those with student debt now? And it's a legitimate question. We've over $15 billion of student debt. What we started talking about in Labor is how we can address that, and we've looked at the health sector. They've got a scheme, a sort of effectively a bonding scheme, where if you go and work in the public health sector in hard-to-recruit areas, then they do effectively a loan write-off. And we've just started the discussion about how we can extend that beyond the health sector, obviously. Easy enough to do in the public sector, but then the conundrum is how do you work that in with the private sector?
And how do you do that? Because, sorry, forgive me, but I want to back up the truck a bit. You went to university, didn't you?
Indeed.
Okay, and was it free when you went?
Yes, I was probably one of the last. I was in the last year, in fact, when we didn't have excessive fees.
How old are you, Andrew?
51.
Yeah, I'm 52, and I think I remember.
Well, you're here to me, so
So I think I paid $130 at the beginning of the year, and that was that. So
that's right.
So we went to university for free.
Yeah.
And then there is an entire generation of people who are indebted up to the eyeballs. Right. Now, Labor are looking at saying, hey, look, this is no good. We want people to have tertiary education. What the hell do you do with the people in the middle?
That is the real problem, because what we're also, there are plenty of studies showing that this is starting to affect life choices. Choices about owning your own home, choices about starting a family. And that issue is becoming quite serious now, and it's a pretty consistent theme in correspondence I get and that all MPs are getting about what we do. So we have to deal with it, and we've got this huge amount of student debt sitting on the government books.
$15 billion. $15 billion, which you can't write off in any way, shape or form, can you?
Certainly not in a hurry, and certainly not the whole lot, that's for sure. I mean, remember that the government books treat this as an asset. The government says this is an asset, it's all going to be repaid. But the reality is it's not. There are significant write-offs happening now, and of course much of it's interest-free, so there's a cost to the taxpayer anyway. What we're saying is there's already a cost. Let's be sensible about it. We know there are issues about recruiting into a whole variety of roles in the regions in particular, and actually in Auckland as well, and public sector roles in Auckland because of the cost of housing. So we have to kind of find an answer to that as well.
And what is the answer going to be? I mean, and yesterday I was having this conversation with Judith Collins, and I said, hey, you're just making up policy as you go along, or in the case of Judith Collins, are you just reacting to Winston Peters? Are you just reacting to the fact you were speaking to student radio and you were playing to a home crowd?
No, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, this is an issue that's come up in many meetings I've had, and Chris Hipkins has had this year. We've both given the same answer, that this is an area that we are thinking about, that we need to do more on. We don't have a specific commitment to make, but we are conscious that it is an issue, and so we will have something specific. But people are entitled to know that we are at least thinking about this.
Okay, so the specifics are that you will potentially reward people or bond people in a way that encourages them to take jobs in regions where, one, people don't want to live, or two, where the cost of living is so high people can't afford to live. Is that the sort of thing you're looking at? That's
the principle, yes.
Okay, and how much will that cost? How much of the $15 billion of student debt will suddenly disappear?
Yeah, well, that's the, dare I say, $64,000 question. So we start with the principle, and we know what the objectives are, and then you've got to work out what the cost is and the time frame over which you can do that. Now, that's why we're not at the point of making specific commitments. But as I say, I think people are entitled to know that we're thinking in this area, thinking about what it means for private sector jobs as well, knowing that we're prepared to look at a workable plan. We know that cost is going to be an issue. You can't just, magic up $15 billion and write it off your balance sheet in an instant. And it is going to take, an extended period of time to get something up and running. But this is where we're going.
Okay, so when will, given that the election is, roughly 14, 15 months away, somewhere in that ballpark.
Possibly less, yeah.
Yeah. When would you expect to have a formal and costed policy on the table?
I would expect sometime by early next year.
Andrew Little talking to me a short time ago.